What if I told you that one of the most powerful skills in the world isn't about being the smartest person in the room? What if it's about being the most persuasive? Well, according to Dilbert creator Scott Adams, persuasion is the master skill that unlocks just about everything else. So let's dive into his framework for influence in a world where, as he argues, facts, well, they often take a backseat to feelings. Let's just start with a really big question, one that kind of shapes how we approach everything. Do facts, cold, hard, verifiable facts, do they actually win arguments? I mean, we're all taught they should, but do they? Really? Adams's entire way of thinking is built on a really blunt and maybe even provocative premise. Facts are just not the main driver of human decisions. In fact, he argues that if you're leading with data and logic, you've probably already lost the battle for influence. He even puts a number on it. Adams suggests that we are 90% emotional and irrational. Now think about that. This means only a tiny fraction of our decision-making is run by pure logic. The vast majority, that's driven by something else entirely, our feelings. So this brings us to what Adams calls the persuasion illusion, this deeply ingrained belief we all have that we're creatures of pure reason. In this first part, we're going to explore why he believes that's mostly just a comforting story we tell ourselves. This quote from his book, Win Bigly, really gets to the heart of it. Just think for a second about a major life choice you've made. Where to live, who to marry, even who to vote for. Adams says you made that decision on a gut, emotional level, and then your brain went to work finding all the facts and data to justify the choice you'd already made. So if we're not logical, what are we? Well, this leads to a really central and honestly very memorable concept in Adams's framework. He has this very specific metaphor he uses to describe us. He calls us moist robots. Yeah, it sounds a little strange, I know, but the idea is actually pretty simple. We are biological machines that can be programmed. We respond in predictable ways to certain inputs, like emotional triggers and cognitive biases. And a master persuader? Well, they're just someone who knows how to write the code. This slide just lays it out perfectly, doesn't it? The gap between how we see ourselves and what Adams says we really are. We tell ourselves we operate like the brain on the left, logical, rational, fact-based. But Adams' model of persuasion, it targets the moist robot on the right, the one driven by tangled emotions, built-in biases, and our, programmable nature. He points to two key bugs in our programming. First up is cognitive dissonance. That's that uncomfortable feeling you get when your actions conflict with your beliefs. Instead of changing our actions, we often just unconsciously change our beliefs to make ourselves feel better. And second, there's confirmation bias. That's our brain's tendency to actively hunt for and favor any information that confirms what we already think is true. A skilled persuader knows exactly how to exploit both of these. Okay, so if we're all moist robots, how does a persuader actually program us? Well, that brings us to our next section, the persuader's playbook, and the specific tools of influence they use. This bar chart breaks down a huge part of that playbook, the hierarchy of emotional triggers. Adams ranks fear as, by far, the most powerful motivator. It just bypasses reason entirely and speaks directly to our survival instincts. Identity, our sense of belonging to a tribe or a group, that's a really close second. Hope is powerful, for sure, but according to this model, it just doesn't drive action with the same kind of urgency as fear. Now, within this playbook, there's one technique Adams analyzes a ton. He calls it the linguistic kill shot, a short, memorable, and often very visual phrase designed to define an opponent in a negative, emotional way. Adams points to a bunch of examples from politics. Crooked Hillary, he argues, works not because of facts, but because it creates this sticky, negative visual. It's super simple, and it triggers confirmation bias in anyone who was already a little bit skeptical. And it's the same thing with low-energy Jeb. It just painted this visual picture of someone who was tired and weak, and that's an image that's really, really hard to shake once it's in your head. In Lion Ted, another simple, rhythmic insult designed to completely bypass your logical brain and attach a negative feeling directly to a person. You see, the goal of these kill shots isn't to be accurate, it's to be memorable. Now, you might be thinking, okay, these techniques only apply in the high-stakes world of politics, but Adams argues they are absolutely universal. So let's take a look at how persuasion plays out in the wild, from the boardroom all the way to our personal lives. The crucial thing here is just how broadly these techniques can be applied.
In politics, a slogan like "build the wall" works because it's simple and creates a powerful visual no matter what the policy details are. In a business setting, a manager might use what's called a high ground maneuver by framing a decision around what's best for the team, which makes anyone who opposes it seem selfish. And in our personal lives, the principle of reciprocity, just doing a small favor for someone, makes them psychologically way more likely to agree to something you ask for later on.
Okay, now here's a fascinating and honestly a slightly unnerving point. You might think that once you know these tricks, you're immune to them. Adams says, nope, you're not. Think about a price tag that says $9.99. Your logical brain knows it's $10, but your moist robot brain still feels like it's a better deal. The persuasion works even when you see it happening. It's wild. I know, this all might sound a little cynical, maybe even manipulative. So how are we supposed to think about the ethics of persuasion? Well, Adams frames it not as some kind of dark art, but as a skill that pretty much anyone can develop. He calls this idea the talent stack. And his point is that you don't need to be the best in the world at any one thing. Instead, you become extraordinarily influential by layering several skills that you're just pretty good at. So for example, combine decent public speaking with the ability to create simple visual messages. Then, deliver them with confidence and repeat them. Each skill multiplies the power of the others, creating this really potent stack for persuasion. So what about the ethics of all this? Adams addresses it with a really simple analogy. He sees persuasion as a neutral tool, just like a hammer. A hammer isn't inherently good or evil, right? You can use it to build a house, or you can use it to cause harm. The morality lies entirely with the person who's wielding it. Ultimately, the number one benefit of understanding all these techniques isn't to become a master persuader yourself. It's to build a defense system. Once you can spot when your emotions are being targeted or when a linguistic kill shot is being used against an idea, you are so much less likely to be manipulated by them. So you now have the persuasion filter. You can start to see the underlying mechanics of influence absolutely everywhere, in ads, in headlines, in everyday conversations. The real question is, what are you going to do with this new perspective, and how is it going to change the way you see the world?